Go ahead and start the recording, please. All right, well, good morning. How are you doing? All right, welcome to our day, our conversations with HR practitioners. We got our 5-person power panel here leading off our morning. But without further ado, we got to get some prizes going right out of the gate here for those of you who have made it on time. Christina Gaines. All right, you get a Cobra prize pack. Let's go a couple more. Leonore. And one more for now. Maybe not the top prize. Michaela. Michaela, where are you? All right. Michaela, where? Catch. There you go. Nice work. All right. So without further ado, we're going to get started here. We've got a panel running about an hour and 20 minutes, and then we'll have lunch today. And we have Kim Magyar, VP and General Counsel for the Retail Division at McLean. But before, as we'll talk about, she was their employment law specialist there. So anyways, but I'm real thankful for our diverse panel. And really the scope of what we're going to explore today is a little bit, they're going to talk about their roles, their specific roles, because a lot of them, we selected them for different reasons. We got staffing people, we got generalists, we got strategic people, we've got development, and we got a director, or a couple of directors. But we got our director here overseeing a number of other HR specialists. So we're going to get introduced to different dimensions within HR, but then also we'll explore some issues for you as students, as employees that'll come up in the conversation. What have they seen that you avoid, et cetera. But the interesting thing is, regardless of whether, let's take a hands. How many of you are actually HR majors currently? Okay, just a couple of you. A lot of people, and maybe they'll talk about it, get in HR, and HR was not in their background. I remember getting called in once to do some consulting. A former student of mine said, hey, can you come help? My girlfriend works for this company, 100 and something employees, and they've just told her she's now in charge of HR, and she was the accountant. Okay, she had zero background. She was like, what am I getting? I just want to make sure, and she wanted to make sure. That was the one thing she negotiated. It's like, I need outside assistance to understand, to, confirm we're doing what we're supposed to do here. And so I went and talked to them, and they really had things in pretty good shape. But the HR function got turned over to the accountant who had zero background. And I think eventually she did come here and take some of our HR classes to get her acquainted. But people end up in a variety of roles, You can change careers for a lot of reasons. A lot of people certainly love it. It's a good way to engage in business. And the good of it is it's so much more holistic and strategic than it used to be. Maybe more of an isolated function historically, but it's so critical that the decisions these people make affects all aspects of a business. So, in general, I'm not going to go read some resumes, but I'm going to have each panelist take a couple of minutes to introduce themselves. How did they get there educationally? What's their general work background? And then what led them into the position they are today? So we'll start right here with Tina.
All right, thank you. Good morning. My name is Tina Flores Navarez. I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources and Payroll here at TAMU CT. So I've been in the HR field for 25 years now, and I got my bachelor's degree. I'm from New York City, so I thought I wanted to be a health services administrator. I wanted to work in a hospital. So my bachelor's is a bachelor's of science in health services administration, and then as soon as I got a job in the hospital, I quickly realized that was not for me. So I switched gears. I got a job in HR under benefits administration because of my work in the hospital and because of my education in health services. And so that kind of translated very well. Then did HR for a couple of years in New York, married a soldier, and eventually made my way to Texas, where he was stationed at former Fort Cavazos, Fort Hood, right? And so then a couple years here, I decided to go back for my master's degree. I attended our university, which was Tarleton State University at the time in 2007. Graduated with my master's and eventually got a job in HR here with the city of Killeen, and then stayed there for 6.5 years. And I've been with TAMU CT for 14 years now, in multiple positions. I started as an HR generalist, senior HR generalist, assistant director, director, and then executive director. So that's my path. That's how I got to the position that I'm in today. I will say, what was the question? What led me to where I'm at today? All of that led me to what happened, why I'm here today, and just finding my passion in human resource management and wanting to continue the work, even though it's hard and stressful, uh, wanting to continue that work. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kimberly Hartman. I have been in HR. This year will be 20 years for me, which is crazy to think about. But I'm a little different. I actually consider myself, and I tell all of my students and colleagues that I consider myself an HR unicorn because I knew I wanted to go into HR in high school. And that is because my mother was in HR for Sally Mae for like 15 years. And so she was my shero, still is. And so I wanted to be just like her. So I knew I wanted to go right out of high school. Went to CTC first and got an associate's degree, and then came here to Tarleton at the time. But by the time I graduated, it was Texas A&M Central Texas for both my bachelor's and my master's degree. I started in the government working with the United States Postal Service. I was there for 12 and a half years and worked my way from a generalist all the way up into an employee relations specialist. And then I left the government and did a total 180 and went to the nonprofit sector and started working for the Armed Services YMCA here in Central Texas. And I was there for 4.5 years as their senior manager of HR. And then in 2021, I went to the tech sector, and I've been at Indeed.com for 4 years now in June, and I am currently their director. They call them strategy advisors, but it's just a fancy word for an HRBP. So I'm a director HRBP, and I support our corporate functions, which is our HR for HR. I get the privilege of being HR for HR, so I support our chief people officer, our chief legal officer, and our chief finance officer. And so that's what I've been doing for the past 4 years. I also am an adjunct professor as well. So I started adjuncting back in 2017, as a matter of fact. And so I've taught here at Texas A&M. I also teach for SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, as well. And so I just love being able to help other colleagues, other students, other professionals along their professional development journey. And all of those things is what led me here today, and being able to speak with students like you and early and mid and late career professionals, even those transitioning into HR. That's something that I'm passionate about. So thank you for having me.
My turn. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ruby Bowen. I have also been in HR for 20 years. I've actually been in HR in this community for 20 years. I got my start. I'm not from here. I'm from New York City, like my friend down on the end. Joined the Army, married a Texan, and the rest is history. My husband brought me here, and then he said, we'll be here for 5 years, and that's it. And 20 plus years later, I'm still here. So that's how I ended up here. I got my start in the military, and so I did everything backwards. Military first, married, kids, then college, then got into the professional world. So I got my degree actually in finance. And when I was in the military, I was a recruiter and I was a career counselor. And so, and of course, a trainer. Everyone is a trainer in the military. And so my passion was teaching others. And that's kind of where my start and the thought of HR was, because I can get paid to teach people in the civilian world. That's kind of cool. And to recruit people and hire people, that's kind of cool. So I got my degree in finance from Mary Hardin Baylor in Belton, Texas. And then I also got my MBA from Mary Hardin Baylor as well. And over the last 20 years, while I've been in this community, I have worked in 8 different industries. So I think I have a unique perspective where I've literally touched every industry that there is in Bell County. I was the director of Hill Country Transit District, which is the HOP, the buses you see running around. I was the director of HR for that for 3 years. I was the director of HR for Clear Sky Rehab Hospital, which is the new hospital that just opened here about 2 years ago. I opened that hospital, so that's kind of my claim to fame, is I was employee number 2, and I literally hired all 150 people that are currently working there. And my pride and legacy is that they were all still working there when I left. So retention is something that you all have learned about, will learn about, if you haven't already. And so I kind of pride myself on that. That's employee relations, employee training, and employee engagement. It's where my specialties, my passion lie. And that's what I love to do. So currently, opening that hospital was challenging, rewarding, and extremely stressful. So once that hospital opened, I said that was fun and decided that I wanted to just pursue teaching as a full-time career. So I left the hospital last year and I started adjuncting here at A&M full-time. I've actually been an adjunct at A&M since 2016. And so now we'll see what I want to be when I grow up, but I think I want to be a teacher full-time. It seems to be going pretty okay. So that's a little bit about me, and we'll talk more, I'm sure.
Hey everybody, my name's Chad Miller. I lead a management consulting business in the leadership development, culture development, and team performance space called Life Abundant Leadership. I'm the newbie to the HR vertical and a little bit as an adjunct perhaps, as a consultant in that space. I started my career well, I'll say, first of all, my bachelor's and first master's were in theology and ministry, and that actually formed in me a passion for people and a drive for helping people grow and succeed. But I also started coding when I was in the 7th grade and programming, and so I ended up starting my first career in technology, actually, and most of that was in the San Francisco Bay Area, working in tech, where tech talent is in high demand. And I worked for a large company. They were Fortune 500, but they weren't Fortune 5. And for hiring and recruiting tech talent, I was competing with Google and Meta and Apple, and my company couldn't pay what they did. So we had to compete with good leadership, good team, and good culture. And we had a really strong retention record within that. Also, when I started at that company, I thought I might only stay 3 to 5 years. That was sort of common in tech in the Bay Area. But I stayed for almost 13 because I had a good boss, a good team, and a good culture within my business unit. And so I really realized the impact that that can have not only on the employee's experience, but on retention, on performance, and all of that. But I still knew I didn't want to stay career tech. I never really wanted to in the first place. And so I did a master's in organizational leadership as I was growing through leadership within that company, thinking at the time that it might pivot into nonprofit leadership. But as I was studying consulting firms in the area of leadership development, team development, and culture, I loved it. I loved everything that I was learning, and I loved the idea of some of the consulting firms that I was studying that were doing that kind of work as outside consultants for other companies. And I was like, I love that. That's what I want my pivot to be. So a couple years ago, I left the corporate world and started my own consulting business. And I think we'll come around to that a little bit more later, but that's me. Thank you.
All right, good morning. I'm Allison Bechter, and I specialize in staffing and recruitment and talent acquisition. So 20 years ago, I went to UTSA and I got my bachelor's in political science and public administration with a minor in history. Luckily, everything overlapped, so lots of dual credits there. I was so frustrated. I did not know how to transition into the real world after a degree in politics, because law school and LSATs was not really something I was looking forward to. And so I went to a trusty old Yellow Pages phone book, if you can remember those. And I found a company called Adecco, which is a staffing company, recruiting company. And I went and looked for employment. And I walked in there and they said, we need somebody. And we are working with a client in Fort Worth. and we want you to help us there. So we ran 3,000 temporary associates 24/7 in a manufacturing facility across 3 shifts, and I loved it. I fell in love with staffing and recruiting. And I have since transitioned into a lot of different companies, some global firms, some smaller firms. And 4 years ago, my business partner and I started our own staffing and recruiting company. And that is all we do. We recruit nationally, locally, and globally for companies, large and small. Everything from HR professionals, accounting, finance, really supporting the manufacturing sector is where our passion lies. We've done healthcare, legal, and so we really focus on that middle to senior management role. However, coming and doing things like this with the early professionals, emerging professionals is what I love to do. So long story short, my degree has nothing to do with HR. I grew up in a really small town with 1 stoplight. We didn't know what HR was. Your biggest employer was the school district. So the phone book is what landed me in HR. And here I am today, and I love what I do, and I would not change a thing.
All right. Well, that actually went way better than my wildest dreams. What y'all were saying was great. We could almost stop now, but let's not. Let's learn a little bit more. Also, as we keep going on, think about the questions you may have for them, because when we get to the end, we'll hopefully have some time there to open it up for questions. So as I talked about in my introduction, the goal is kind of to describe what you do in the field of HR. And we've seen a lot of different dynamics in what each person does. So think about either what you're doing now, or in Ruby's case, what your last deal. Think about a typical week and kind of talk through with everyone your particular role. What does a typical week kind of look like for you? And this time, pass the mic down. We'll start with Allison and work our way back here. Kind of change it up here a little bit, but yeah, just what's the flavor for that type of job and tasks, et cetera?
Yeah. So, like I said, I strictly focus on talent acquisition, recruiting, and staffing. So I work with larger to mid-sized companies on where we do direct placement. So we recruit candidates for companies to go directly to their payroll. We recruit for contingent or contract or temporary professionals to go in and either be, a fractional step in for maternity leave or for different reasons on that contingent contract side. So my typical week is recruiting. I'm out talking to people all the time, every day, all day, do networking events like this, lots of interviewing, lots of resume help, LinkedIn help, lots of professional coaching and development on how do you find your next role, or really what do you want? And titles aren't everything. Compensations may not be everything. So I do a lot of coaching outside of my standard recruitment practices. Staffing, talent acquisition, recruiting, that's my week. I talk to people all day long and connect them with opportunities. I do negotiations on offer letters, and that's literally all that I do. I get people jobs every day, and I absolutely love what I do.
So as I mentioned, I'm a management consultant. Sometimes I'll introduce that as fractional HR, but then I do have to clarify, there's a whole lot of HR that I don't do. So as a consultant, right now as well, I'm a solopreneur. It's just me and my business. And I focus, as I mentioned, exclusively on leadership development, team development, and culture. So whenever I say fractional HR, I'm saying I can come alongside an HR department that may not have full-time resources to focus on those programs of leadership, team, and culture, and sort of supplement their core HR, which is doing things like compliance and benefits and compensation and stuff that I have zero expertise in and am not really looking to work in. Only get into a little bit of benefits and compensation as it pertains to the organization's culture. because obviously those things play into the organization's culture. So my role, like I say, may look like in terms of day-to-day and week-to-week, and what drew me to it is helping those companies develop their culture, develop their team performance through things like doing a lot of assessments. I use a lot of assessments in my work: DISC, emotional intelligence, one on motivators, one on mental toughness, one on team dynamics for trust and accountability and conflict management and all that stuff. So I use a lot of assessments as the core and the foundation of what I work, and then based off what we uncover through those assessments, then we'll start doing some, okay, what do we need to do to improve our marks in these areas? Also in terms of culture and talent management, I mentioned my background in tech. So obviously I think about things from a technology perspective. So one of the roles as well that I can serve is coming into a small to mid-sized business and say, let's get some tech platforms in place that will actually help you shape culture, because most good leaders know that culture is important. They don't necessarily know what to do to shape it or how to tangibly get traction and results with it. So I'll work with them to implement solutions for that. So everything from speaking engagements to workshops to helping them roll out and implement software platforms. And when I started my consultancy, that day-to-day and week-to-week is what I had in my mind. But I will say, if you ever think about starting your own business, be aware that that's only going to be a fraction of your time, because as the solopreneur, you wear many different hats. So I spend a lot of my week right now networking, meeting people, prospecting, business development, just going out, trying to develop that clientele, doing the paperwork that's got to get done for the legal side of the business or the finance side of the business. So all that to say, if you think about starting your own business, beware of getting into it just thinking about what you want to do for your clients, and think about all of the business development that's going to be necessary to get you there. And if that doesn't sound appealing, join a firm with other people that do all that.
So I will speak to healthcare, because that was my most recent role before coming to teach full-time. So opening up a hospital, kind of like being an entrepreneur and doing your own thing, you are responsible for everything, literally everything. So my day-to-day after the hospital opened, so once we got past to filling all of the positions, my day-to-day was compliance is a huge thing in a hospital, okay? So every day I had a different audit that I would do a 10% on. We did a lot of forecasting and strategic planning. So I was a one-person shop, and you might find yourself in that situation where you're the only person who does your job. So I was the strategic business partner for the CEO. I reported directly to the CEO of the hospital, and anything he needed basically became my job as his trusted advisor. So if it was, where do we want to spend this $1 million grant that we got? Do we want to buy new equipment? I don't do equipment, but I will find the answer for you. Do we want to hire more staff? Do we want to invest in training and education to certify people so we don't have to outsource some of these tasks that we are doing? We can invest now, and a year or two from now, we can make that an in-house position rather than an outsourced position. So a lot of just strategic planning of what we were going to need, and we did that on a 12-month calendar. So at any time, I could tell you 6 months from now, here's what we're going to be doing. Also, every 2 weeks, people want to get paid. So I would run payroll. I would plan onboarding for the new hires that we had. I would be planning the replacements for people who had given their notice that they were going to leave. One positive thing about working in healthcare is healthcare professionals, they know months in advance when they're going to leave. And they will give you sometimes 2, 3, 4 months notice, because they know it's going to take that long to replace them if they are in a highly skilled or a low area where there's not a lot of talent. There's lots of jobs, but not a lot of talent out there. So they were courteous enough to give that the professional courtesy to us. So I was tracking that always. Then employee engagement, like I said, was my biggest thing. Working in a hospital is a unique animal. It's a 24-hour operation. A lot of times it's thankless. You know, we have people from janitors all the way up to the CEO that I had to service. And so I had to have the ability to share the same message with every different level of employee and make sure they understood and they felt included and it made sense and they were a part of the team. And so my engagement efforts were great. I celebrated birthdays, celebrated anniversaries, celebrated Black History Month, Women's History Month. Every month there was something to celebrate, to include the Employee of the Month, where we would hold a committee, and I led the committee, the Employee Engagement Committee, so that employees could tell us what they wanted, but then also I would meet with the leaders and say who's doing really great things, who do we want to recognize, and explain to them why recognition was so critical in what we did. And so really it was just every single day walking in the door going, what's going to happen today? Is a patient going to go berserk and I have to go appease the family and talk people off the ledge and let them know we're here to help? Is an employee going to be completely overwhelmed because they have a life outside of here and their job is very stressful and life is very stressful? And so I would counsel people and they'd be in my office complaining about different things, and I'd give them that safe space to do that, remind them why they were here, to serve the patient, and when they were in a better headspace, welcome them to leave and go back to doing what they do and doing the good work. So really just being the face of the company, being the change champion, being the encouragement for people when days were down. I served food in the cafeteria because it was important for people to see that I was also a part of the team and I was a part of everything. And I would tell them we're all a part of the puzzle, and if one piece is missing, this doesn't work. So if the patients don't get fed, they're not strong enough to go to therapy. If they can't go to therapy, then their meds aren't going to be doing what they need to do. They're not going to feel well enough to do that. The family's not going to be happy when they come and go, why isn't my patient getting better? And so all of these pieces played a part, and all of the different departments played a part, and I was kind of the glue that kept everybody held together and kept my eyes open and my ears to the ground to look for areas that might become a concern, and how could I address those before they became a concern for the people that we served, but also for the staff members that I believe I served as well. So if you want to be in a space where you get to have your hands in everything, you can definitely do that in a healthcare space. You can definitely do that in a consulting role or a strategic partnership role, and you will learn so many more things than you ever wanted to know about so many things besides HR, as you said.
Awesome. That was actually a really good segue into what I do, because that is the crux of my job. Like I said, I am a director, we call HR strategy advisors, but again, very fancy word for an HRBP. But that is essentially my job. We are an 11,000 person company, and so I have a team of 5 that support specifically the 3 functions that I'm assigned to. So I am all things what Ruby just described, but for those 3 specific functions: for our chief people officer, which is HR, our chief legal officer, our legal function, and our finance function, and our chief finance officer. And so as the director, I own the relationships with those executive, or we call them senior leadership team members. And so I do all things strategy for them, thinking long-term, looking around the corner, seeing what's ahead, and then understanding what our senior leadership team members, what they need and what they want for their organizations. And each function is very different, right? HR for HR, very different client, very difficult client, because HR professionals aren't the best, aren't the best clients because they think they know everything. But that is the reason why HR for HR exists and why I love my job and being able to support them. And right now, for say like my chief people officer right now, we just went through a major team reorg, and so we used to have an HR team and an ESG team, or an environmental, social, and governance team, and now we are one team, and we call ourselves people and sustainability. So there's a lot of engagement, there's a lot of culture things that my chief people officer is looking at specifically for her team, but also thinking about being that chief people officer and being all things HR for the CEO, and thinking about company-wide for an 11,000 person global company. For our legal officer, his vision right now is thinking about, specifically for the products and services that we want to deliver as a company, how his legal team can help with the compliance of all of that, the products and services that we offer around the world and globally, how that affects each segment of our business. And so right now, AI is the big thing, right? Everybody is thinking about AI, but we're also thinking about AI talent, and specifically in the legal space, his vision is, how can I hire more attorneys, more legal analysts that have that background? So I'm his partner in thinking through through that for his function. For our chief finance officer, he's thinking about compliance as well, but from a finance perspective, and how he can think about global payroll and tax around the world, keeping Indeed compliant and keeping Indeed in a good financial and fiscal position. So I'm thinking about specifically each one of their goals and what they need to do for the company, but also from a people perspective, how can we enable the people of those functions to do their job and do their job well? Corporate functions is usually a very, we are considered a support function. We don't necessarily do all the revenue generating like the R&D side of the house or the research and development side of the house, which is our tech side of the house with all of the software engineers and business analysts and product specialists and all of those things. And so they can easily tie, from the tech side, you can easily tie what your work is to our products and services. From a support function, that's a little more subjective. And so my job as the HR professional is to help our chief people officer, our chief legal officer, our chief finance officer help their employees understand how their work connects to the bigger picture and how we continue to grow revenue and continue to grow as a company. And so a typical week can look like having meetings with all of them, right? And thinking through each one of those things, but also from a cyclical perspective, performance management, looking at recruiting and staffing. So I've considered my job, HRBP specifically, as super generalist. We do everything. We have a hand in everything. But for my level, and specifically we call it strategy, is because I have to think about all of those things and be able to connect it and anchor it back to what our company needs and what our company goals are, and then separate those goals out by function. So that is what I'm responsible for each and every day, and then I have a team of 5, like I said, that work with me in supporting each level of those leadership spaces as well, all the way down to our frontline employees. And so I love what I do. It is a very enjoyable job. I also own my own HR consulting firm, and so I do a lot of teaching that way. So like I said, I teach and consult for the Society for Human Resource Management, specifically, and I specialize in helping others pass their SHRM certification, so the SHRM Certified Professional and Senior Certified Professional. So a typical week can look like 8 to 9 hours at my day job, and then I go to my night job and I'm teaching HR professionals at night how to pass this test. Just last night, as well as part of my HR consulting firm, I do coaching and mentoring. And so I just finished up a 6-session commitment with an executive director for a nonprofit in Chicago. And so his 6 sessions were focused on his leadership and his leadership legacy and what kind of legacy he wants to build, thinking about executive presence and all of those things. So I get to do a lot of it. I get to touch a lot of things because I love all things HR, but that's what a typical week could look like for me, and I'm trying to slow down now. My colleagues always tell me, like, how do you do all of this stuff? But I know it's a cliche, but you've probably heard the phrase, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I honestly and truly love what I do. I love helping others, and HR was a way for me to be able to do that. And so I've been doing it for 20 years and plan to continue doing that for as long as the industry will have me.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. So here at the university, I have the pleasure of having a team of 6 people, and so a lot of them do different things. We have HR generalists who focus on staffing and recruitment. I have an assistant director who focuses on benefits and wellness, and so I rely heavily on their work and their expertise. When there are issues that arise that require my interference, I will say, or assistance, that's when I get involved. So I really give them a lot of autonomy because we're a state university and state and public university. So we have a lot of requirements that are dictated by our state of Texas and being a part of the A&M system. So a typical week for me ranges, like everyone else pretty much said. I could be dipping my toe in recruitment and staffing just to assist them with the work that they do, benefits administration, compliance, records retention. We're such a small university that I don't have the luxury of having people to do every little aspect. We don't have an employee relations specialist, so that falls on myself. I work a lot with our supervisors, some of our employees when there's an issue, an investigation. as a university, we have Title IX, as you all know, as students. So I'm also the Title IX Deputy Coordinator. I assist with investigations, complaints, etc. I work with our leadership team when right now we're really focusing on a strategic plan that's new and we have updated. And so right now we're in the middle of a compensation study to address our salaries and see if we can, how marketable we are and how we compare with others in the industry. So it really varies. I would say this week the focus is on coaching and professional development. But it ranges every single day from one aspect of HR to the other. Trying to hire new staff, trying to provide business proposals for more staffing in the HR office because we're so small, we're stretched very thin. So at the end of the day, I've touched every aspect of HR and work with I work closely with our CFO, who works closely with our president. So that's pretty much it. They've all said it, everything, but that's a typical week for me.
Thank you. So we're going to change it up. If you pass the microphone down to Chad, we'll go Chad down to the end and work her and rotate back this way. So as your experiences and roles have changed, what dimension of HR or corporate life have you enjoyed the most? This could be work itself, interactions, etc. What's been your most rewarding aspect?
Yeah, like I say, when I was in corporate, I wasn't in HR, so I can't compare to a corporate HR experience, but being within consulting in the HR space, obviously what I love the most is what brought me into it, which is working with companies to help them create better work experiences for their employees. I mentioned my background doing theology and ministry. That's what motivates and drives me, is helping people, and that's why my business is called Life Abundant Leadership. People hear that and think, oh, you're a life coach? It's like, no. But the reason I called it that is because when people's work experience gets better, their life gets better. We spend over half our waking lives at work, so if we can improve work, we improve life, and that's what drives me in what I do. So because of that, I love working with leadership teams to improve experience for their employees by getting better leadership, better teams. Everybody's more motivated, they're performing better, improving the culture of the organization where people are motivated and driven. All of that's my favorite. As I mentioned, as a solopreneur and a newer solopreneur, a lot of my day week to week is just trying to get those clients and build that up. And that part I'm not as big a fan of. But yeah, I love working with the leadership teams to improve their workplaces.
So being strictly in the staffing recruiting space, I change lives daily. I get to talk to people. I get to offer jobs almost daily. I get to talk to people that like, oh, I worked for this company for 10 years and you're recruiting me to go over here and I can get a $20,000 pay increase. So the coaching and the impact I have on individual lives is what drives me. It's what motivates me. Although I have a certain space that I focus on professionally, personally, doing things like this is what makes me tick. I love holding resume workshops. I love doing that early career coaching. Just having that human aspect. I mean, we're all humans. There's human in HR. So giving back is what I love. And again, what makes me tick. If a company's coming to me and saying, Allison, we're going through an M&A and we're gonna have to reduce our staff by 100 people. And I know that sounds horrible, but I love going in those scenarios to saying, okay, let's talk about offboarding and what we're gonna do. We're gonna do resume coaching. We're gonna do this. Let's make sure your LinkedIn's up to date. We're gonna here's who you need to connect with. Here's how you need to get involved. Look at this person, look at that person. I get to connect people every day, and that's what I love. Connecting people and changing lives. That's what makes me tick, and that's where my impact is. And I would not imagine doing anything else. There's different people here. I don't want to deal with employee relations. That is not my thing. I get people jobs. That's what I do, and I love it. You know, when there's a disaster, going in and helping people, or when a company's coming in to say, you know what, we're building a new facility, we're going to need to hire 100 people, and sitting down at the table and coming up with that recruitment plan and that strategy. Again, you're looking at immediate hires, you're looking at as the company expands and grows, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. What does that look like? How does that company expand? And from a talent perspective and strategy, what does that look like? So although I am impacting lives daily, but sitting down with leaders and talking about how to build their business and build their operation from a talent perspective is also something that I get to do quite frequently.
I think it's comical to me. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. Like I said, I got a degree in finance. I graduated college, got my first job at a bank, and within 30 days said, "What did I do? I don't want to work in a bank with a degree in finance." And I needed help immediately to connect the dots with what now, right? So I was fortunate enough to have amazing professors and mentors in my life who said, "Pause for a minute. Why did you pursue this? What was the end goal for you? And how can we translate that into something else?" Well, I started it because when I was in the military and I was teaching people how to do everything, you name it, I was a trainer. So I was literally told, "Here's a manual, learn it and go train on that." It could be anything, something I knew, something I didn't know. I loved teaching people how to do things that enriched their lives. And so with finance, I thought I'll go into banking and I'll help people save money and be fiscally responsible and buy their dream home. And I thought I could help people by teaching them how to do something for themselves that would pay dividends in the future, no pun intended. And so with that thought and that pause, I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. I just want to help people. I want to help people realize their goals and their dreams. How could I do that? And she said, well, you like people. HR people like people. I'd never considered HR before that, and I said, but I have a degree in finance, and I don't want to do payroll, which is what I was doing at the bank. What did I do? And she goes, well, give it a chance. And that's what led to becoming a training coordinator for the city of Killeen, where Tina worked. I became a trainer, and I thought, this is awesome. I love this. And by being on a team where each person had their own center of excellence, I dipped my toes into each one of those centers while doing my own job. I got the exposure to other things and learned, I love this, don't really like that. How could I foster that more? And so all throughout all of everything that I did, it was helping people. No matter what I was doing, I was helping people. And ultimately it clicked. I have had an awesome opportunity to work in many different industries, to work under many different types of leaders, good and bad, and to shape myself into the leader that I wanted to have at times that I didn't think that I did. I felt like I'd gotten to a point in my career where I had something to offer others by way of coaching and counseling and advice. And if I could just spend all of my energy asking people what someone had asked me 20 years before, where's your passion? Now let's see what you know how to do, what you don't know how to do, and get you there and shape you there. That led me to being a teacher. And so all of my HR experiences inform how I teach HR, which is what we do, but it gives me a different perspective on HR. It reinvigorates why I loved it in the first place, why it excited me, why I was grateful that I had all these different opportunities and took all these different roles. Some I liked and some I didn't, but why I had that mentor in the back of my mind going, give it a chance, just give it a try, and if it doesn't work, try something else. But the end goal is I wanted to help people realize their own dreams. And so where else better to do that than in a college setting where you are all embarking on your future dreams, and you might not know exactly what that looks like, but you're on the right path and you just need someone to kind of steer you in that direction. And I pride myself and feel so honored to have the ability to be that still trusted strategic partner and advisor, but in this case, I'm being strategic and helping you with where you want to go with your life rather than where the company was going with profits. But it's all the same to me, and it's still my passion.
Okay. So plus one to all of those things. The only thing I would say differently is because of my journey, I knew what I wanted to do. But finding my passion within HR, because I do like every piece of it, but for me, finding my passion within HR was really about the teaching and the coaching and the mentoring. that is the space where I feel like if you haven't heard of this book, it's a really great book, but it's called The Big Leap by Gay Grisham. And he talks about being in your zone of genius. And when you are in your zone of genius, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like passion. It feels like purpose. And so I found that passion and that purpose when Dr. McPherson approached me about teaching for Texas A&M. I had always enjoyed training because as part of HR, like that was part of my job. I had to train on all the things, especially at the post office, training on all of that. I didn't really care about the work at the post office, but I liked the interaction with people, like the aha moment when people get it, right? And being able to help people do that. And then when I was finishing up my MBA, Dr. McPherson was like, hey, we're starting a program here where we're going to be going out to the Gatesville prison system and teaching inmates within the Gatesville prison system intro to HR, intro to business leadership courses as part of our program to help reduce the recidivism rates. And so she was like, I think you'd be really great. Would you consider it? And I was like, I never considered like actually being a professor. Like I was like, okay, cool. And so when I started it, I fell in love with it and I just kept on from there. And then teaching for Texas A&M led me to teaching for SHRM, and then teaching for SHRM led me to teaching for a company called Black in HR as well, where I do a lot of teaching, and then I do coaching and mentoring there too. And so outside of my day job, I would say that is like what I enjoy the most about HR, but within my day job, I love being able to not only talk to our executives, but talk to our employees as well about just things that are happening within their day-to-day, like professional lives. You do have to draw a boundary and a line when it comes to the personal because, you know, HR, just the sheer weight of your role as an HR professional, people take what you say as gospel and as gold. And so when you start advising and sometimes can cross a line into the personal, it can get very blurry. So I try to stay as professional as possible, but also showing that human empathy for where people are in their lives and meeting them where they are. Because again, that's where I find my passion and that's where I find my purpose. But being able to sit in a room with an executive and talk to them about what they want to do, what their vision, their goals for their functions are, and for what their vision is, and being able to influence that just by having a conversation or being able to bring data to the table and show them, hey, this is what this looks like. If you make this decision, this is the potential downstream impacts of that decision. Let's explore something else, right? Using things like appreciative inquiry, where you are talking to an executive and you're like, tell me why you're making this decision instead of you shouldn't be doing this. Because a lot of people think about HR and they call us the no police. We're just there to tell them what not to do, or we tell them no to everything. And I find that it's my personal mission to change the way not only business thinks about HR, but how employees think about HR. And so being able to use things like appreciative inquiry and approach things from a different way to get them to see there are different ways to approach things. There are different solutions to problems. You don't have to just go in and bulldoze your way in, but you can have a softer approach. You can still get what the business needs, but you can also make sure that you're taking care of the human beings doing the work, right? And so that is something I think just being able to connect that through the work that I do every day in my day job, and then also the things that I'm passionate about and the things that I do outside of my day job as well too. So that's what I would say, and I'm just loving all of the things that every one of the other panelists mentioned, but coaching, teaching, being able to help people just realize their professional development dreams and where they want to go is something that I truly enjoy.
I would have to say what I truly enjoy is working with our supervisors to create a better environment for our employees and having those conversations with them where there's those aha moments where they identify the error in their ways and how they could create, and working with them to create a better environment for our employees. Also trying to stay compassionate, but also compliant with our rules and regulations. I think that's a hard thing for some people to grasp when they have to dictate what do you do and no and say no, and they have a hard time with saying no. So I kind of work with them and coach them on how to deliver that information in a kind way where it's very obvious that it's not personal, it's the work environment. And you'd be surprised how many people have an issue with that as far as, saying no. So that's one of my passions, collaborating and working with our supervisors and our leadership teams. But I will also say wellness and benefits is a part of one of the things that I enjoy the most speaking about. I think our benefits here are amazing. It's part of our recruitment packet. It's part of your total compensation and rewards. And so I'm really passionate about speaking about that because I think we have a great package and we offer wonderful benefits here. And a lot of times we don't focus on that enough. We're focused more on salary and, of course, the environment and the culture that we have here, which is extremely important. But educating people about how to use their benefits, what we have here, how it can help them personally and professionally, which is a conversation we lack a lot of the times because we're so focused on salary and the work itself. So those are the things that I am passionate about the most. I echo everything else that they said. I agree with all of that, but if I would say two things, that would be the two: coaching and working with our supervisors, and benefits and wellness.
Thank you. All right, Tina, you can pick it back up. We're going to start with you and work our way back. So now we're going to shift gears just a little bit for thinking about, from your experience, expertise. You've seen the wide range. What, not HR specific, what general career advice would you give to these students as they're still completing their degrees? What's a major pitfall, or what's something that they should have picked up and learned to do along the way? But what's that quick nugget or two that you would pass on, given the mistakes you may have seen, or wish that someone would have done one more thing to develop themselves, or whatever that it may look like?
I would say find a mentor, find someone who's in the position that you're in or on their way to that position and has the experience that you might be lacking. Finding a mentor, it could be one of your professors, it could be one of these wonderful people up here on this panel. Just finding someone who's where you want to go, that will be very helpful. Kimberly mentors and is part of her, and I'm sure Ruby does as well, but that would be really exciting. Also, intern. If you're trying to pivot to a field that you have no experience in, see if an organization is willing to allow you to intern. I know in my field, we value experience a lot more than education. And that might be sinful to say at a university. But in HR, we love you having a degree, but we want to know you can do the work. And if you can't speak to volunteering, interning, or having some sort of experience, you might fall a little short on the list of the other applicants that we have in the pool, right? So I recommend getting some type of experience and just kind of making sure that you get someone to walk you through that, because it can be very difficult and frustrating. Being from New York City, I had multiple opportunities there, a big city. But when I came to Texas, I found myself very short and feeling very defeated when I was looking for a job in human resources. It was very hard. And so I had to start doing other types of work just to work and to continue to develop my skills. I would also say don't put yourself in the corner, right? Don't say, I only want to focus on this. When I worked for the city of Killeen, every time there was a vacancy in a different area, I was the senior person that was working there at the time, so I had to help. So I learned payroll. I learned workers' compensation. I learned staffing and recruitment because I was a benefits person, so that was my focus. But as all those positions were vacated and they needed someone to step in, I didn't ask for more money. I saw the value in what that experience was going to do to my resume and how it was going to make me more marketable for the next position that I was looking for. So I know we all need money, but sometimes you do need to do the charity work so that you can learn a different skill. So that's what I would say. Be willing to be open, be curious, be willing to be a good team worker, team player, learn some extra skills because you're going to need them eventually, and find a mentor and or intern or a volunteer.
So all of that, she kind of took a little bit of my answer too. So I'll focus more on the softer skills that I see a lot of times that cause hindrances or cause your career to fall a little shorter than you want. The main thing I would say is be open to feedback. Everyone says that I'm open to feedback. I'm open because it sounds good. But the truth of the matter is, human beings, we don't like feedback. We don't like to be told when we're doing something wrong. Let's just say the thing, okay? And just be very honest. But when I say be open to feedback, is to be open to critical feedback and understanding that you're not perfect and there are things that whether you've been doing a job 5 minutes or 30 years, there are always new things for you to learn and for you to get better at. And so a lot of the times, the things that I see within a lot of corporations and a lot of the sometimes the pitfalls that people fall into is that they're not willing to hear critical feedback. And so it starts to turn into interpersonal issues, either with your supervisor or another colleague. And then it gets to a point where one or both of you are fed up and one or both of you leave, right? Or heaven forbid, but let's just be honest, this is what happens in corporate America. You piss off the wrong person, and then next thing you know, opportunities get shorter and shorter for you. Why? Because you're not open to feedback or you had an attitude when someone tried to tell you something. So again, just be open to critical feedback, be open to understanding and knowing that there is something else to learn. Work on your interpersonal skills. You don't have to be best friends with people at work, but you do have to respect one another and find a way to adult and be able to do the work that you have been assigned to do, because a lot of times those interpersonal issues can mask themselves as task issues. And what I mean by that is you'll be working on a specific project or you'll be doing some work, and maybe in your performance evaluations, people will start talking about like the actual tasks that you may or may not do wrong. But unfortunately, sometimes the underlayer of that is you've had a bad conversation with someone, or you show up with a bad attitude every day, or you don't know how to get along with your coworkers, right? And so it's an actual bias, but it happens all the time because we are humans and humans have biases. And so sometimes you can stand in your own way of your career development and your career aspirations. So that's what I mean by making sure to be open to critical feedback and working on your soft skills of being able to, even if you don't personality-wise don't click with someone, being respectful of the other person, being able to have a conversation and disagree without it turning into something personal or personal jabs or holding grudges and things like that against other people.
I'm going to say one of the most critical things that you can do for yourself today, not wait another day, is to start building bridges through networking. Like Tina said, it's a fact. A lot of times you've got everything on paper, but you've never actually done any of the things that the paper says you theoretically can do. And without that experience, you're going to get passed over. And so through networking creates those opportunities for experiences where I've never done it before. I don't know anybody who's ever done it, but I know this one person who knows somebody else who's looking for somebody to help. And I've gotten many, many opportunities strictly through networking. One thing that you might not know, you need to hear it be said, and you need to hear me tell you because this is a fact. Most jobs that are out there are not posted. They're not posted. They are filled by somebody who knew somebody, okay? That person was qualified for the job, but so were you. But the difference was they knew the person who knew that the job was there. And they got it before you ever even knew that an opportunity was available. So by building those bridges, getting on LinkedIn, connecting with people you don't know, but they're in the industry you want to be in, starting to reach out, volunteering at different organizations, just so people get to know your name, get to see your face, start recognizing you when you show up for events. Like, didn't I see you at this other thing that was going on? Start volunteering. Never sell any of those short as invaluable opportunities for you to put yourself out there and start building those bridges. So when you're ready to get the job and they say, have you ever done this in a work setting? You can say, no, I've never actually been paid to do that, but when I volunteered for this, I did something very similar. And when I volunteered at that organization, I did this, which sounds very similar. And so you're starting to plant that seed. Okay, they're capable. They have the exposure to it. They might not have the 5 years experience or the 1 year experience, but they know the language. They know what I'm talking about. I can teach them. And they're telling me that they're willing to invest in themselves by volunteering for these things. They didn't ask for money, like Tina said. They didn't do it because someone gave it to them. They sought out that opportunity, and that speaks volumes for you when you're competing against someone else who may have just always been in the right place at the right time and had all the right connections and all the things. In the end, it doesn't matter. You can make those opportunities for yourself by doing this one thing, and that is putting yourself out there and networking.
So two things really come to mind for me. First off, I would say getting really comfortable with technology, even if you're going into HR. Some people go into HR because they're not comfortable with technology. HR is not what HR used to be, and HR is an industry that is transforming when we're talking about things we love about HR. One of the things I love, and granted, yes, my background was tech, but it's being transformed, and it's no longer just sort of like a cost center. It's a strategic value add to the business. Technology is really coming in ways that's transforming the way companies engage their people. So there's a lot of opportunity there for you as people coming into the organizations to bring in innovative minds to think about how can things be transformed, how can technology be used to shape our people operations within the organization. So all of that to say, whether you're getting into HR or you're not, be aware of what's going on in the AI space and technology development. Josh Burson is a great resource for tech within HR and how it's transforming that. I'd encourage you to check that out, check out other resources, and just start bringing that problem-solving, innovative mindset to the HR space. So that's the first thing, getting comfortable with tech and the value it can bring. The second, I would say, on the flip side of that, is going to be sort of like you were saying, investing in your soft skills, your people skills. As much as tech is important, people skills are important. Decades ago, there was a study done that 85% of business success is your EQ, 15% is your IQ. So you're all here and you're developing a lot of knowledge, you're developing trade skills, that's all great. Your people, that's like bare minimum to play and to what will take you to success and help you advance is the way you interact with other people, the way you're open to feedback, the way you problem solve, the way you do time management. School isn't just about checking the boxes. Take advantage of what's required of you in terms of time management to get your assignments in on time and all that, because that's going to set you a step above when you go into the workforce. If you can effectively time manage to meet deadlines and things like that. EQ, just your overall self-awareness, social awareness, responding to the situations. All of that, I would just say really invest as much as you're investing in your education towards trade skills. Invest in developing your character, developing your soft skills, and the way you interact with other people, because that'll be a big differentiator as you come in. There's a phrase that's, just lost. So working smarter, not harder. Again, I worked in automation. If anybody's talking about working smarter, not harder, it was the team that we automated things so that people didn't have to work harder. But that only works if the other people aren't also working hard and are smart. And there's going to be lots of other people that have the skills that you have potentially, but you can set yourself above by the way you interact with people and your soft skills and all that. So just really want to echo what she was saying.
Okay, ditto. No, so I want to kind of tap into a little bit that everybody said. First and foremost, what Ruby said, I do recruiting. 95% of the jobs that I'm recruiting for, I don't post. So build your network. That is key. And that goes into what everybody else has said. Get a mentor. Get in a group. There's a lot of groups on LinkedIn, on Facebook, in our community. If you're looking in HR, check out your local HRM group. I sit on the board for the Syntex SHRM group. We have a conference coming up. We're looking for student volunteers. You can attend the conference for free. Chad sits on the Williamson County SHRM board. Kimberly teaches for SHRM. So if you want to get in HR, you got 3 people right here ready to help you out. I lived and worked in Austin for 17 years. I'm very well connected in the HR community there, but not only HR community. Again, I focus on manufacturing, so I'm in manufacturing groups, women in manufacturing, the Austin Regional Manufacturers Association. There's so many groups that you can get in, get a mentor, get that networking done. Little things, the chambers here, get in with the chamber, the Economic Development Committee, or not the committee, the Economic Development Commission? Council? One of those words? The EDC, yes. Temple, Belton, Killeen, Harker Heights, all the communities have them. They have chamber events. Get involved. The first thing you do is show up. If you want to focus on the construction industry, maybe look at Habitat for Humanity or the Builders Associations. There are so many groups and nonprofits that are looking for help and support, and you have a lot of leaders that go into those communities and go into those groups. So get in there, go shake hands. Another thing is don't be afraid to ask questions. If you're going in for an interview, ask a question. When I'm interviewing people, the very first thing I ask is, what are you looking for in your next role? So you be prepared to answer that. Maybe not for me, but what are you looking for? Define those things. Going back to the compensation conversation, not everything is about compensation. I can't tell you how many times I go to these global companies, the Facebook, the Meta, the Big Four on tech, whatever it is. I pull people from there all the time because they're tired. They don't want to work 70, 80 hours a week. And I put them in small to mid-sized companies where they can wear many hats. They're not siloed in a role. So ask questions, define what you want in a role, and go for it. Apply for anything within that arena that you're looking at. Take the interview. Nobody is an expert interview, so always take the interview and gain the experience. And once you land a role, ask questions. What do I do to get here? Everybody, pretty much everybody on this table did not start in HR going to school or right out of high school going, I want to do HR. I had no clue what that was. I went to the phone book. I got my degree in political science, technology, and theology, like healthcare, finance. We all just ended up in HR. Ask questions and identify what you want, and then you pursue that.
Thank you. Okay, at this point, we're going to turn over questions to you. So if you've got an HR field specific or a general employment question, you've got 5 practitioners here with lots of industry experience in a variety of fields. Raise your hand and I'll bring the mic around. Okay, good. We're jumping it. I like it.
From a hiring perspective, when reviewing a resume, would a master's degree or a SHRM certificate weigh more?
So I'm going to say it depends on the environment. For example, you can be in an HR department of one where they might look for skills and make sure you can wear many hats. A lot of times it can be, you know what, that SHRM certificate is good. I do have a client that's looking for an HRBP right now, and she is requiring a SHRM certificate. But that proves you have the education and the knowledge and the training to do the job that she wants. Then I have another customer that just, I want somebody that has 10 years in the field. They understand our operation. They're not afraid to put on steel-toe boots and go out onto the floor and understand what the Allen Bradley CNC machine is doing. So it depends on the role in the company and the hiring team, would be my advice.
Thank you.
I will plus one to that, but I will just add, be very, very intentional about your education. Education is a very, very, and all of you know, it is a very financially heavy commitment. So know what you want to do and why, know your why behind it. Because just like she said, it really does depend. But I will tell you, looking future forward, especially looking at AI and how I believe AI will be enhancing jobs as well, but also AI will not take your job. Someone who knows how to use AI will take your job. So education there is going to be super, super important, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the end-all be-all. Something like a SHRM certificate demonstrates your ability to be able to apply the knowledge that you have into different situations. Again, people want to know that you can do the job and that you have the knowledge to do the job. So again, it really does depend, but I will always be a proponent of education, but just be very intentional and know your why behind it. Don't just go and get a master's degree or a second bachelor's degree just for the sake of thinking, oh, it's going to look good on my resume, without having a clear plan of how you intend to use it. Yeah.
Tina, did you have anything you wanted to say? Okay, perfect. Next question.
I got a question for the entire panel. Y'all wear many hats. What is the actual cutoff time for y'all? Y'all was told to talk about your week. So when does family time kick in? Because y'all saying this time, and I'm leaving another job and jumping to another job. So this is for the entire panel. So when does the family time kick in for y'all?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Work-life balance, a big factor in HR today.
So the tagline in HR is it depends. Okay, that is the tagline in HR. I've worked in 8 different industries, and it was a different answer in each one of those industries. I left healthcare because I didn't want to do 50, 60-hour weeks anymore. I was a consultant for a D1 school, and I had VPs that would email me at midnight and expect an answer by 7 the next morning when they started their workday. And I would literally sit up until 11, 12 o'clock at night anticipating the email that I knew would come that I was told not to answer. But if I didn't answer, then I had to answer because that was the client I supported. So it depends on your own tolerance. If you are a workaholic, which I do not recommend, but have been, so this is the pot calling the kettle black, okay? Your own tolerance for what you want to do. If it's a passion, it doesn't feel like work, you can do it 50, 60, 70 hours. Entrepreneurs are successful because look at Elon Musk, who says he worked 120 hours a week. I don't know how that's possible, but he says he did it, and I don't doubt it that he did it because that was his passion for what he was building. So I'm not going to tell you that, yes, there's a 40-hour work week. I've never had a 40-hour work week except for when I was in the military. And then even then, I had lots of 24 hours when I was deployed. So define for yourself what you want out of what you're getting. Ask your leadership. Ask the questions. What are your expectations for me while I'm here? And how do I get your job? What'd you do to get your job? Did you work weekends? Did you work nights? Did you volunteer for every opportunity to travel out of town? What'd you do to get there? So again, the networking is what I'm harping on because that's your chance to ask the person in that job you want, how'd you get there? And then you can decide if that's the sacrifice you want to make to get there. Every job is going to have a sacrifice. And for me to say, I'll work 50 and I'm cool with that, it's not a sacrifice. But for somebody else, they're like, nope, I'm working 30, not 31, that I'm done. So define for yourself, what your tolerance level is, set those boundaries for yourself, and then let your leadership know. These are my boundaries. I will give you all I have for 40 or 50 hours. I actually had a job where I was required to work a 50-hour work week, to be scheduled to work a 50-hour work week. But I knew that going in. Knew it right from the jump. I got to work a 50-hour work week. Got it. So to me, that wasn't over because my family knew I will be working 50-hour work week. But when it became 60 and 70, then we had to pause for a minute.
Tina is one of my best colleagues, and so she knows this has been a journey for me. But I wanted to share because I have a real-time example of that. Like she said, when it's a passion, it doesn't feel like I'm working. But thank God I have a very, very, very understanding husband, and he supports me in all of my endeavors. However, boundaries is the key there, and that is something that I am continuing to learn and put in place every single day. This current company that I work for, Indeed, is all about work-life balance. We have open PTO. We have all kinds of wonderful work-life balance programs, but I take advantage of that open PTO all of the time. As a matter of fact, Friday, I will be leaving for a cruise. and I will be gone all next week. However, there is a balance. I think I've earned the performance capital and the relationship capital where that we have a huge project going on called Job Architecture. We're doing a framework for an 11,000 person company. And so next week, there is a what we call an offsite or technical sprint that'll be in our headquarters in Austin all next week. I was scheduled to go, but I had vacation already planned, and my boss was like, no, go and be with your family. However, just learned today, and that's why I'm like, this is a real-time example, that we are being required to go over the analysis for each one of our functions with our respective senior leadership team member. I have junior members of my team, and that's not something that I'm willing to put them in just for the sake of me being on vacation. So what did I do? I had a conversation with my husband just this morning. I was like, hey, I'm gonna have to bring my laptop with me. Wi-Fi is amazing, so I can get on the Wi-Fi, but I need to have 3 meetings with my 3 senior leadership team members to go over the analysis and how this is going to affect our functions, and then I'm gonna close my laptop and I will be done. And so it's just having that communication, setting those boundaries, but you also need to have what I call the performance capital within your organization, where people know that you have a reputation for getting things done, you have a reputation for being there for your team, you have a reputation for being there for other people within the organization. So even when there's huge projects like what's going on right now, my boss was very comfortable and like, no, you do a lot and you do enough. Go be with your family, right? And then I can make the personal decision of, for as a leader and leading a team, I'm going to step in and I'm going to be there for my team for these specific hours and times to take care of this specific thing, but then I'm going back and I'm going to spend time with my family.
I just want to add one thing. I'm not going to repeat what they said because everything they said is true. I will say this, when you start looking for that employer of your choice, check with their wellness, right? Do they have a wellness program? Do they have a unlimited PTO program? What is the culture at that organization, right? Because we allow our employees to take 30 minutes 3 times a week for wellness, and they can do whatever they want. They can sit in a corner and read a book. They can meditate. They can go for a walk. They can go to the gym. But it's part of our culture here. We want you to take care of yourself and find the work-life balance. So that's what I would recommend on top of the guidance that they gave you.
Okay, got time for one more. Nope, got on the far side. And I think several of them are going to hang around for a few minutes, so you can obviously ask individual questions after the fact.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hello. Hi, y'all. Ms. Hartman had mentioned the importance of being open to feedback and constructive criticism and not letting that become, kind of an interpersonal experience. And I was wondering if y'all had any advice on the delivery process for constructive criticism and how to make sure it remains effective and prevents any of those concerns that were mentioned.
The delivery is always hard. It's always good to know who you're talking to and that emotional intelligence kick in and know how to kind of deliver that message to that person, right? I'm a typical New Yorker. I want it straight. Just tell me like it is. Don't beat around the bush. But I will say that doesn't mean my feelings won't be hurt. I'll need a few minutes to get over it and then realize that the feedback was necessary. I would say a lot of times the guidances start with a compliment, right? Make sure that you're telling them like not everything is terrible, but here's something I observed and I just want to help you. I think if you're delivering it with good intent and being very clear that this is not because I want to put you down, I want to lift you up. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to share some hard truths. And some of that feedback is probably not going to be welcomed in the moment, but if you reflect on it later, we can talk about it and dig into deeper. And then also providing support, right? If I say you need this, I should, as a leader, be able to provide you with what you need, whether that's additional training, whether that's some sort of support outside of the organization, whatever that is. So a lot of times they say do like a sandwich, right? You start with a compliment, you tell them what the problem is, and then you end with a positive response later. But I would say it should start with, not everything is broken here. You're doing good work in these areas, and then get to the the issue at hand and then provide them with some solution or support.
The one thing that I will add to that is when you have to give feedback, first make it known. Hey, I need to share some feedback with you. Is this a good time? Can we make some time? Because if a person is not ready to receive what you're going to be giving them, they're going to become instantly defensive and shut you out. And we're all human. So you're going to be thinking about your rebuttal. You're not thinking about what they're saying to you, right? So I always start with, hey, I need to chat with you. Got to talk with you about something, okay? I need a couple of minutes. And then setting that space to do that. So I have a designated space. I'm giving 15 minutes to this meeting. You have all my focus and all my attention. That way, if things do kind of go south, well, you need some time to process. You know, I only gave us 15 minutes. Let's circle back after you've had some time to think about it. So you're giving that person time to digest what you've said, to come up with a response. You don't have to respond now if you don't have an answer. That's okay. Letting them know that's okay. The important takeaway is I need to share some feedback. I need you to hear me. I need you to make an action plan, and then we'll follow up. I'll circle back with you after and see how you're doing and how I can support you, like she said, with making this happen. But really, that's the most critical thing. If the person is not ready to hear it, no. And I hate being surprised in that way. I mean, I just want you to tell me I've got thick skin, but at least give me the heads up that I'm about to come in here and not be told that I smell like roses today, okay? Like, give me that little heads up, and then we're cool. So that's kind of my last little add-on to that.
Yeah, so with what it's Tina, right, was saying, definitely knowing the person. There's an assessment called DISC. She mentions as a New Yorker, she'd be a high D. They like it very direct. For an S, you'd want to deliver it different. So get familiar with that. Check out the DISC assessment and get to know, if you're in a position of leadership, the different styles within your organization and take that into account. Something else that I would say when I'm consulting with folks about crucial conversations, difficult conversations, it starts long before the room where you're having that conversation. So it's not just the delivery method, it's what's the relationship with the person before that. So as much as delivery is key, and there are some key things about it, I'd say as well, trying to keep it objective, identify their performance, what they did, what their action was, what the impact was to the organization or the team, and keep it forward looking towards how is this positive going forward for the person. But all that's on the tactical side, but I would say just as important as the delivery mechanism or methodology is the relationship with the person before. As a leader, you want to be developing that relationship where the person knows you have their best interest at heart. As much as the time is critical, like Ruby was saying, the relationship is critical. If they don't believe that you're giving that feedback for a positive outcome for them and for the organization, it doesn't matter like how you deliver it. So you really want to set yourself up for success in that conversation by the relationship that you develop with them, letting them know you have their best interest at heart. And the only other thing I would say is, like I say, letting it focus towards a forward-looking, this is for your good, for the good of the organization. This is trying to put a positive direction towards it is also helpful.
My advice would be real time and be exact in your feedback. Don't say, last week you did this. Give it real time. You know, can we talk later today? Can we talk in the morning? And then don't talk in generalities. Be precise. You know, you said this, you know, call it out. I was training somebody and they said, you know, we didn't look at them because they were about to retire. You can't say that. There's legal issues there. So we had an off conversation. Thank God it was a training situation. I was like, we can't have those conversations, and you straight up discriminated. So you said this exact word, and this is what the issue was, and this is the ramifications of that. So be very direct in that feedback.
All right. Well, we're going to transition now to lunch, and then we'll have our keynote here in a little bit. But you know, any of you have had me, either I've been your supervisor or I've been your teacher, you know I have pretty high standards. In my wildest imagination, I could not have imagined that every single response to every single question was better than I had hoped for today. So panelists, thank you so much. Y'all blended so well together, and so many good pieces of advice. So now that they'll still be around to interact a little bit, or some of them, I don't know if anyone has to jet out quick, but we have food in the back, so by all means, go get yourselves lunch, and we'll get started here in a little bit. Just as an FYI, we're going to get started here in about 4 minutes. I think that's about when everyone will run through the line the first time, but feel free to get back up. We've got desserts. I didn't see anyone was rating them the first time, so we've opened the cheesecake bites, and we got some cookies over there. Relatedly, one of the things that was announced or that we want to mention is if you are interested in a career in HR, if you haven't heard, we do have a student SHRM chapter, so be looking for that. Ms. Eads is one of our sponsors, and get engaged with that aspect as well. While I'm talking, I will go ahead. We got some other people, some other prizes. People are still here. Is Wesley Steer in the room? Wesley? All right. Alexis Kelsey? Just left. Must be present to win. Jaden Weiss? Okay. Josie Varela. So over there in the bin, okay, there are Koba shirts of various sizes. Go look and see if there's one in your size. If not, we can get you one, okay? Emily Mayo. Oh, man, goodness gracious. All right, it is the lucky table. Yep. Thank you so much, Steve. Okay, we are going to continue with our programming. Again, like I said, just feel free to get back up if you need more. But how long ago did we meet, Kim? Was it two years ago?
It was, I think, longer than that.
2 or 3. So Kim and I met back associated with Boy Scouts at the time when I was serving with the Chisholm Trail chapter, working as a merit badge coordinator locally, and we had coffee outside of Starbucks in Temple because my connection was that in our industry, I don't run into a lot of employment law people. My research and teaching area is employment law, and that was her initial background, though she shifted a little bit now. You're what, VP General Counsel Retail at McLean, okay? And if you don't know McLean, it doesn't necessarily put itself out there as the company that it is, but the company that it is big, okay? They have their hands in a lot of places, a lot of products that you consume, they delivered it or helped coordinate it, and it's even more diverse than I originally was. I grew up in Temple, and so the original owner, Drayton McLean, their family lived in there, and still their offices are. And so she'll tell more about that, but what she's also going to talk to you about is just some of the various things she's seen as an employment law attorney and attorney in general in business that, pitfalls, traps, helpful hints, and just kind of take it where it goes. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. So again, my name's Kim Magyar, and I'm the VP and General Counsel for our retail division at McLean. We have two separate divisions. We call them retail and restaurant. So the restaurant side is headquartered up in Carrollton near Dallas, and it originally started with Yum brands. You think KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell. It's since expanded to all the favorite concept restaurants that you can think of right now. Things like Chick-fil-A, Darden restaurants, including Olive Garden, including Capitol Grill. So that's our restaurant side. They do a lot of those, we call them fast casual restaurants, those concept restaurants that have proprietary items where you know whether you're going to go into one of those stores in Texas or in California, you're going to get the same quality food. And so that's our restaurant side. On our retail side, it really started, and we grew up a lot with 7-Eleven, which remains still one of our largest customers. And, you know, if you think about, I know I always wondered, you go to a major metropolitan city, let's say you're in Dallas, and you find a downtown 7-Eleven, and you walk in, and they've got a container of soft tuna cat food and maybe some crunchy salmon cat food, a box of Special K and maybe some Lucky Charms, and you think, who the heck is buying all this stuff at a C-store? And how is this not all rancid? Because it just doesn't seem to make sense. Well, enter McLean. So we are the largest purchaser of many of the items you find in a C-store. And what we will do is, because those convenience stores are relatively small footprints, and they don't have a lot of storage in the back, so they can't buy a case of everything or a pallet of everything to get good pricing. They just want a couple items. So they will reach out to McLean. We will open a tote. We'll sell them one or two. They want a bag of Reese's, and then they want some, you know, Twizzlers. We'll sell them whatever they need, but it doesn't have to be in large quantities. So we have very small markups, but huge, huge volume. So I always say we're the largest $50 billion company you've never heard of. We're owned by Berkshire Hathaway. And, you know, it's been a wonderful place to work. I actually grew up in Wisconsin, so if you hear me overpronouncing my vowels, that's why. You can take the girl out of Wisconsin, but you can't take the Wisconsin out of the girl, and go Pack, go. I'm sorry if you're a Cowboys fan. Oh, the Bears. Could be worse. Could be the Vikings. No, just kidding. Exactly. Anyway, so I originally grew up in Wisconsin, and I decided that I wanted to go to law school. And, you know, law school is something that I think a lot of people might think is out of reach, not something that even enters their mindset on something to do. And I always tell people, if you're interested and you have two things, anybody can be successful in law school. You need two things. That is time. You have to be willing to devote 3 more years of your life to law school. But also, you need money for the school. And we were talking earlier, some of the panelists were saying, you need to do your education with something in mind, because law school is really expensive. And, you know, there are a lot of students now that are graduating with 6 figures in debt, multiple 6 figures in debt, and then frustrated because they've got those golden handcuffs and they need to be working those 80 hours and their work-life balance is not good and they're not happy. So, you know, you need to make sure you're doing it in a way that makes sense for you and what your goals in life are. But I love being a lawyer, and I think it's just the best job. And I think a lot of times with HR, too, it's very similar, because we never know usually what our day is going to entail. There's so many facets that we can really run into from each day to day. And so it's really an exciting and interesting career choice, and one that I would always recommend if you have any interest in it. And I'd be willing to talk with any of you afterward if that sounds like something that you'd want to do. I will also say, if there is anything that interests you about being an attorney, gone are the days where you needed to get a poli-sci degree or some sort of pre-law degree. And so what really a lot of places are looking for is diversity in the legal community. Because if you stop and think about it, if you enjoy science, chemistry, get your degree in that, and then you can go and maybe you're gonna do intellectual property, and you're gonna help those scientists make sure that they're, that they get patents or that they get trademarks on the things that they're working on. And then if you enjoy art, same thing, you can help artists make sure that their music that they're creating is properly copyrighted. There's just so many different avenues you can go into. So certainly, I always tell everybody, get your undergraduate degree in whatever interests you before you even worry about law school. And then afterwards, if you do find that interesting, you can go in that direction. But earlier I know the panel was saying, listen, nobody ever wants to talk to HR. That's always, the thing where people are like, I don't want to deal with HR. Well, even worse than HR is legal in HR. So labor and employment attorneys, no one wants to talk with us. If someone's meeting with a labor and employment attorney, I think the perception a lot of times is something went wrong, something bad has happened. So I would encourage you to reframe that, because really, no matter what you guys are going to be doing in your careers, you have to think about how it may impact the business, what the risk of what you're doing may impact the business. So you may not be in charge of legal at your companies or wherever you're working, but what you do can have a huge impact on what the business does. And so I wanted to talk about a couple things that are common pitfalls that I see, and some of them were even brought up during the panel today. And one of the things that I think oftentimes is repeated a lot, and this was mentioned multiple times on the panel, is not having those tough conversations. So when you're doing employment law, and it's time to terminate a person because they're not meeting expectations at the company, that person should know that they're not meeting expectations of the company. But you would be surprised how many times I talk to people and they're like, Kim, she's just not cutting it. She's not meeting expectations. And I'll say, go pull her performance evaluations. Let's look at what we've said about Kim over the last 3 years that she's been there. And yeah, exactly, exceeds expectations. Kim's a shining, star in the department. She's spectacular. That's the worst thing that any of us could do for a company. Because now, when Kim is getting terminated, and she's like, surprised by that, thinking all my performance evaluations have said that I've knocked it out of the park, that I've been doing an amazing job at work, and now you're telling me you have to let me go because of some failing. That's when people start questioning, well, maybe it isn't that my performance was poor. Maybe it was discrimination. Maybe it was something illegal. And that's when you're going to be subject to charges of discrimination, complaints of hostile work environment. We were talking about this earlier. I find a lot of times when poor performers are facing negative consequences at work, a lot of times they're trying to save their position or their job, and they're grasping at straws to try to figure out, how can I continue to stay at work? And so, not always, but sometimes you will have people who will grasp at a straw and say, this is a hostile work environment, or I've been discriminated against. How do you defend against those when you say, no, it was Kim's performance, she just wasn't a good worker? When all your performance, all your documentation that was generated contemporaneously to Kim's performance says she's amazing. It's not going to be good, I got to tell you that. So make sure you're having those tough conversations. And like the panel said, at the time, contemporaneously to the negative events, you're documenting it. It doesn't have to be super duper formal. Some companies have formal processes. Sometimes it's just a note to yourself. On this date, I met with Kim, and I told her that her performance was failing because of X, Y, and Z, and we discussed ways for her to improve, and this is what we said. And sometimes it's just a note to yourself. But on that date that you had that conversation, so later on, if something comes up, you have, evidence, if you will, to be able to say, no, 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 this had nothing to do with Kim's gender or Kim's age or some protected class that Kim might fit into. This had to do with performance, and here's some examples of, what I'm talking about. You will win every single one of those cases. So, really making sure that you're having those tough conversations. People hate it. No one likes to tell somebody that they're not succeeding. I mean, just think about it. Think of how happy you've been when you got a raise. I mean, everybody loves those conversations. You're doing well, you're getting a raise. That's wonderful. But the conversations that maybe there's areas of improvement, those are a lot harder to have. But I'd say they're more important than the positive ones. So that's one of the things I'd really recommend that you all do. And by the way, if anybody has any questions for me, things that you want to ask, I would love to entertain questions. We don't have to wait till the very end. Just feel free to raise your hand and blurt out the question. I'd love to talk with you and try to make this a little more engaging and interactive to what you might want to hear. But I know, we were talking about different things to address today, and they were really sort of pitfalls that I see that happen frequently over and over. Another issue I often see is getting blinders on. And I'll explain that, but employment is tough. There's a lot of different things to think about. And so this is an example that I see frequently. Someone will get hurt at work. They're injured. We all know, what is that called when you're injured at work? Workers' comp. Very good. It's workers' comp. So you send them over to workers' comp. Guess what? They're going to get their benefits to pay for that injury, regardless of the reason they were injured, okay? Workers' comp has to cover those injuries. Now, in Texas, you can opt out of the workers' comp system, and some employers do, but we're not going to get into that. But the majority of states, if you have workers' comp, you have to cover those injuries. But what I've found is a lot of times HR professionals will forget that other things could also come into play besides workers' comp. So they will say, teammate, you're injured, go head over to workers' comp and they'll deal with you. But at the same time, what about FMLA? What if they have a serious health condition now for themselves and they need time off, protected time off? It might be covered by FMLA. And you might want to start running that 12-week time period for FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and you might want to start letting them know, hey, your injury might qualify. It may be a serious health condition that would qualify for FMLA. Here's the paperwork, get that filled out. Then it's protected. So that's something to think about. But then even more, as they're proceeding through that, what if the FMLA runs out, the 12 weeks are done, the person's still injured, can't come back to work? Well, then you have to start thinking, what about the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act? Is there some interactive process that you need to engage with? And I would say always you do need to engage with them and figure out whether you can grant them some sort of accommodation that would enable them to return to work and perform the essential functions of their job. So that's just one example. I call it employment word salad because it's workers' comp, WC, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and FMLA. And it's all these acronyms, but I feel like sometimes in HR we get so focused, well, that's a workers' comp injury, and that goes over to somebody else perhaps that's working on it, and you don't even think about all the other things that could possibly impact that teammate, be relevant to that individual, and really, make a difference in what you're doing for the company. Yes? Exactly.
Won't stop talking to me about her sleeping and was saying that said, well, wait a minute, he's criticizing her for bringing up an ADA.
Right.
Because it's a
Right. No, and earlier you were mentioning that someone said, hey, we don't do this training he's going to retire. Basically saying you're too old to warrant this training. Like it's wasted on you. And, again, that's a problem. But, people aren't doing it because they're trying to discriminate. They're doing it because they don't know any better. And again, you don't have to be a lawyer. Over time, you learn these things. But I would say, earlier to the panel's point, like find a mentor, find someone more senior in the company that you can go to when you have these sorts of questions to bounce them off of them. And, I think just as important as trying to be prepared yourself is really making sure that you're asking questions and not just going, well, I think this is the right thing, and then charging like a bull in a china shop down a certain path that might not be the correct one for the situation. So really making sure you're involving others and being, taking a nice, thoughtful approach rather than a knee-jerk approach, I think can be so helpful. Yeah, go ahead. So it depends on the company. Some might put it in HR. Ours is within our risk function. So we have a risk department and they handle workers' comp. It's not in the HR department. I think that's probably why some of the HR managers then forget about it because they're like, well, that went over to workers' comp. It's no longer in my kind of wheelhouse. So they forget about it and they forget to do all the HR components that they need to be doing like FMLA and ADA because the person is in a different department dealing with the workers' comp, but they all overlap. And so anyway, I think some companies may have it in HR. It just sort of depends on how they're organized. And there's no real, way that it has to be. Whatever works for that corporation. Yeah. So, I know I talked a little bit about McLean, and I mentioned that I grew up in Wisconsin, and then after law school, I practiced for a couple years, and long story short, we were talking about work-life balance. My husband decided he wanted to become a pilot, a commercial airline pilot. And so you can do that in Wisconsin, but it takes a lot longer to get your ratings and certifications because the weather's so lousy most of the time, and until you get your instrument rating, you can't fly when there's clouds. So most of those flight schools are in warm weather climates. So long story short, we wound up moving to Phoenix, Arizona, because he wanted to start this new career. He had impeccable timing because he started his flight training in July of 2001. We all know what happened, 9/11 occurred, everything came to a screeching halt. But that brought us out to Arizona. And at Arizona, I applied and got hired by the largest law firm in Arizona, Snell and Wilmer. And I originally started doing product liability litigation. So we did a lot of consumer products, automotive, and medical device products litigation. So that's when we're defending companies against claims that their product was defective. We did a lot of work on the Ford Firestone litigation. I don't know if you guys remember when the tires were detreading and people were rolling over and claiming that the vehicles were defective. So we handled all the litigation west of the Mississippi. Great trial experience, loved it. But when you're trying cases west of the Mississippi, you are oftentimes traveling to different locales for trials. You're traveling for expert depositions. It's a lot of work. And at that point, we were trying to start a young family. And so I knew something was going to have to give. So I really thought, I need more work-life balance than I'm getting at the large firm that wants us to work, all these hours. And so at that point I thought, I'm gonna try to go in-house to a company where hopefully you can have a little bit more work-life balance. So this is what I'm saying to you guys. I know all the panelists earlier were saying, all of them wound up in HR. They didn't plan on it. You never know where your career is gonna take you. And sometimes it just sort of organically happens. Sometimes based on what's happening in your life and what's important to you at that time, and your work-life balance choices may impact what your career winds up being. But there's no right or wrong answer. You have to do what works for you. Well, I was looking for an in-house position in Phoenix, and even though Phoenix is, I think, now the 4th largest city in the nation, it's so relatively new in terms of population growth. There's not a lot of companies headquartered there. And so there's not a lot of in-house positions. And I had a friend of mine, this is again getting back to the power of networking, Cyrus Martinez, wonderful guy, and he had recently gotten hired at Hershey, Pennsylvania, in Hershey, Pennsylvania. He got hired at Hershey's in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And so he was out in Hershey, and he said, Kim, McLean is hiring. Well, how many of you, prior to me entering this room today, have heard of McLean Company? Actually, quite a few. I'm impressed. I was like, McLean what? I had no idea what McLean was, had never heard of it. And again, we're a wholesale distributor. Everybody knows our retailers that we distribute to. They're the best brands in this nation. And everybody knows the products we're distributing. The Hershey's, the anything you can find in a convenience store, the Nestle products. We deliver so much candy throughout this nation. I mean, all of us know that kind of stuff. But most people don't ever stop and think about that wholesale distributor that's in the middle. And quite frankly, we like it that way. We enjoy sort of staying under the radar so that we're not necessarily the target of litigation. And I will say, when I was in Milwaukee first practicing, I did some work for now one of our customers, Walmart. And, whatever you think about Walmart or not, they're huge. Everybody knows Walmart. And they become, at least in my opinion, the target of litigation because they're so big. And people think, well, we're just going to sue Walmart. And so, just by virtue of them being such a large company, they're the target of lawsuits. So McLean generally likes to stay under the radar, stay kind of quiet, and hopefully stay out of that target of litigation. And so far, it's worked pretty well. But even still, you'd be surprised at the number of cases that we see. And I know we were talking when we were at Starbucks that day about one of the cases I got to try. And this is completely me nerding out as an attorney, but I got to go to the United States Supreme Court and argue before the United States Supreme Court on a case involving McLean. And it was the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, was suing McLean over our use of an industrial physical capability evaluation. Say that 3 times real fast. We call it IPCS for short. But we were using this evaluation pre-hire for our physically demanding jobs to make sure that the individuals who were hired into those jobs could do the physically demanding aspects of their jobs, not just one time. All of us probably, well, pretty out of shape now, but most of us probably could do that job for a day or two. But when you're unloading an entire 52-foot trailer every shift with a hand truck or dolly down a ramp and delivering it into your retail locations, that's a physically demanding job. And so we were utilizing this examination. The EEOC said that it was discriminatory and that it discriminated against women, older workers, and workers with disabilities. Ultimately, they sort of pivoted, dropped the disability, and went after the women and older workers. And then turns out there really wasn't any disparate impact on any older workers, so really the focus was women. And it's interesting, I'm of course biased. You can have a physical evaluation pre-employment if there's business necessity and job relatedness. So it's not illegal to have that. Now, if you talk to the EEOC, they don't like any pre-employment tests whatsoever, so they weren't too thrilled with it. Anyway, so they were seeking information of all the teammates across the entire company that had ever taken this evaluation, their names, their addresses, their social security numbers, their birth dates, like everything. We called it their pedigree information. And we said, we don't want to give you that. Like, we have that information because our teammates gave it to us for their employment, not to hand it over to just whomever for whatever. And, there's been some case law that says the EEOC can't have this information to try to, what I'm going to say, basically troll for, plaintiffs. And so we actually were successful. This case actually started in Arizona, in Phoenix, at the district court there. We won there, and then it went up to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which at that time was really liberal, and then they ordered us to turn over all the information, and then we wound up taking it to the United States Supreme Court, who actually reversed the Ninth Circuit of Appeals and found in our favor. So really amazing experience. I highly recommend, if you ever go to DC, of course go to all the museums. They're amazing. Most of them are free. Just spectacular museums there. The Smithsonian is just spectacular. Air and Space, of course. We've got the Holocaust Museum, spectacular. The African American Museum. Oh my gosh, if you haven't been there, put that on your list. You start at the bottom where it's almost like you're reenacting being a slave on a ship coming over from Africa, and then you work your way up through civil rights. It's so spectacular. And the food there, in their cafeteria at the African American Museum, they have collard greens, they've got, fish and fried chicken. It is the best lunch you will find in DC. My biased opinion. But anyway, so there's all these amazing museums in DC. But if you get a chance, check if the Supreme Court is in session and go watch an oral argument. It's amazing, and I know I'm a nerd, and it's probably more nerdy for me. I probably enjoy it more than maybe you would. But just being in that hallowed sort of institution that has really been one of the three branches of our government that is engaging in the checks and balances on the other branches. Whether they do a good job or not, that's everyone's individual opinion. It still was amazing to watch. And the Supreme Court justices, I thought, what is this going to be like? They don't have any term limits. There's some very old justices, and they came out and they started peppering the attorneys with questions that were so spot on and intelligent. It just made me feel so happy to live in this country where we have a judiciary like that. And it was just a wonderful experience. So I highly recommend that if you're ever in the DC area to go check it out. But yeah, so I got the chance to handle this Supreme Court case, which is just unusual. The Supreme Court, I think everybody probably knows from your, middle school or high school civics classes, they don't take every case. They get to choose what cases they take, and it's a very small percentage. I knew at one time, but I can't recall what that is any longer. But it has to be a case that they decide is important enough. So, when you get a case to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, it's a pretty big deal. So that was really fun. And I got the opportunity to do it at McLean because of this case that we were facing. Interestingly, it's been many, many years, and we still believe that evaluation was legal and non-discriminatory, but we have ultimately discontinued its use years ago, so we no longer use that. But so it's an interesting case that we had to deal with. But you never know what you're going to wind up having to deal with when you're in HR, because there's a lot of legal issues. And I was saying earlier, I'll give you a prime example. The worldwide pandemic, COVID-19. Think about what was happening, this pandemic. Places were shutting down. You're part of the business. You're like, are we essential? Are we not? Do we stay open? We're providing food, you would think essential, but it's also candy, cigarettes, cat food. Again, remember, nobody could get toilet paper. Do you guys remember you couldn't get anything at HEB? Where were people grocery shopping? The C-stores. They were. C-stores were selling more than they had ever sold in their entire, business operations. So, we were providing a very valuable service to, our communities who may have otherwise not had those products because of the worldwide pandemic and the issues that were going along with that. So, and then, when you're dealing with teammates, I remember just constantly trying to navigate the myriad of constantly changing laws on, do you have to wear face coverings? Do you not? Is it optional? Do you have to do anything like provide paid sick leave if people come down with COVID-19? Some states were requiring it, some were not. How much do you have to provide for them? How often? Because at that point, remember at the very beginning, people were constantly getting exposed and then they'd stay home. And so, it was really kind of a Wild West trying to navigate that arena. Do you have to do temperature checks before they come into the building? If there is a COVID-19 exposure, what do you do in terms of cleaning? Remember at the very beginning, no one really knew how to clean it. We didn't know if it was transferred by touch or by air. So you're working with your business operations, trying to help them navigate, compliance with the laws and the regulations, but also trying to do what's best for your teammates without stopping the entire company. And so I think a lot of times we forget that we're really part of the business. And I know earlier some people were saying, we're really a cost center in HR, but you also are part of the business in helping to mitigate risk and provide for your teammates. You're the one that is walking that line to help the teammates and also help the business. Yeah, did you have a question? Okay, I thought I saw your hand raised. So, it was really, really fun. Lot of work, but then just when I thought, oh, good, we're coming out of the, worldwide pandemic, then guess what? Supply chain hell. Do you guys remember? There was all those questions on why is inflation going up like crazy? What's going on with the supply chain? The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, tasked with looking into antitrust violations, they did a 6B order, and they sent it to 9 companies, 3 retailers, 3 manufacturers, and 3 distributors. We were one of the lucky distributors to get one of these 6B orders, which is really like a subpoena. And it's mandatory that you respond. You can't just blow it off. And so we had to respond to the FTC as to why there were supply chain issues, which seems a little crazy. We literally had to do discovery searches through C-suite level employees, emails and everything, and they wanted to know what's causing this supply chain issue, which I just wanted to say, pick me, I'm gonna tell you, it's the fact that half the country is shut down, we have a worldwide supply chain, when China is not shipping anything, that kind of impacts the rest of the world. And then the other problem was labor. Remember, when half the people are out because they either have COVID or are exposed, you don't have any workers. So when you don't have workers and you don't have raw goods or materials, it creates a lot of problems. I was talking to the manufacturer of Cheez-Its, and they said, we don't have any problem with all of our Cheez-Its. They're fine, but it's the ones that go on the hanger, they're like aluminum lined, or I don't know, some sort of metal it looks like on the inside. The plastic bags in the cardboard boxes were fine, but they couldn't find whatever that metal, I'm sure it's not aluminum, but whatever goes in there, they couldn't get that material. So they weren't able to make any of those little smaller bags of Cheez-Its. Sprite, if you guys remember, the 20-ounce bottles, they couldn't find the green or yellow plastic for on the top of the cans. So they were using like white a lot of times. They couldn't find the green. Just weird supply chain issues because of this breakdown in the worldwide supply chain. So we had to provide a formal response to the FTC. We had to give a special presentation to Commissioner Wilson and sort of explain to her what our position was on this. And then just finally, I think last year in the early part of 2024, they released their study where they basically said, listen, they were a little bit critical of some retailers taking higher price increases than they actually incurred from the suppliers that were providing them items. But overall, I think they came to the same conclusion we all really realized, is that it was really a problem due to, a lack of labor and a lack of, certain raw materials and goods. So, but I mean, who would have thought? Here I am, the labor and employment attorney, and now I'm going through all these COVID, restrictions, and then now all of a sudden you're looking into responding to an antitrust investigation on why the supply chain is disrupted and whether there's any, unfair competition going on out there that's causing the record inflation. So it's fascinating, the things you run into. You just never know what you're going to wind up dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So, I honestly think, making sure that you're finding a mentor or reaching out to your legal if you've got questions. A lot of times I find people are afraid of legal. They don't want to call us. They don't want to deal with us because, they feel stupid. I don't know. They think I should know this, or I don't want to bother them. They're really busy. I don't want to bother them. But sometimes just a simple reaching out to either your mentor who may know the answer or to legal, and you can mitigate that risk, do things the right way that will prevent litigation or lawsuits or claims in the future and really help the company in the long run. So your roles are so important. I always say to HR when I'm working with them that you're the eyes and ears of the company. Like, you're more out there dealing with, well, we call them teammates at McLean, but dealing with those employees. You and the frontline supervisors will know who's disgruntled, who's happy, who's having issues, and being able to address those things. Legal doesn't know. They keep us in little offices, and they don't let us wander around because they're afraid what we're going to say to team. No, I'm just kidding. But no, it's really HR and the frontline leaders that are out there that are really that line into what's happening in the workforce, and it's so important. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions. It's really fun. The legal HR sphere is spectacular. We've dealt with issues like wage and hour compliance. You'd be surprised. I'll just give you an example. We accidentally had an issue. We do payroll in-house. We accidentally paid people twice. We tried to retract the payment. It worked at some banks, but some it didn't work. So some people got 2 paychecks. Not everybody. This was limited. I don't know the whole story, but so of course, what did we do? We said, hey, we accidentally paid you twice. Do you think you could pay that back? And some of the teammates were like, sure, it's not my money. I didn't earn it. Some of the teammates were like, quitting, see ya, good luck, Thankfully, that didn't happen in too many instances. But then you have other locales, like I'll say New York by way of example. They have laws in place that say if you are trying to recoup money from a teammate, even if it isn't, it's not their money, like you accidentally paid them too much, you can only take out of their paycheck 12% at a time. Okay, so we had teammates in New York that were like, even if you write them a check, they're like, I just want to pay it back. I don't want this 12% coming out of my check every single paycheck. And New York won't let you do it. You have to, even if they write you a check, you can only take 12% every paycheck. It's just insane. So sometimes the laws out there are a little wacky, but you figure them out and you do your best to comply with them. So I don't know. Does anyone have any other questions for me? Yeah. Do you have anything? No? You're just... Good. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think it's both. So even when Cyrus alerted me that the job was posted at McLean, you always need to apply to the posting. But the interesting thing was, apparently at McLean, they were utilizing Snell and Wilmers for some of their legal work. I never did any of the work. I was working on other matters for other clients. But so then they were able to talk to some of the people. Thank goodness they didn't have anything too bad to say about me. But so that, they were able to say, hey, this Kim Magyar applied. What, can you give me a little, backstory and information about her? So again, making sure that you're building those networks, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's, again, Cyrus and I never worked together, but we were both employment attorneys, and we'd go to various events, and we got to know one another through that. And we were also both looking for an in-house job at the same time and sort of, keeping each other apprised of opportunities. So I do think networking is so, so important, and you never know when an individual will wind up being important to your career. So I always like to take the position that I try to be nice to everybody because, it may be somebody that you think has no relevance to your career. They're in, information technology or whatever you were in at the beginning. And you're like, that's not my area. I'm not in IT or IS. But you never know where they'll wind up in HR if that's what you want to be, and they'll become relevant perhaps at some time. We were talking at the end back here when people were getting food, and everybody's like, oh, McLean, I know Barry, and I know Heidi, and it is a small legal it's a small legal community. It's a small HR community as well, and you get to know everyone. And so I think it's really important to build those relationships, maybe not now, and do it in a way that you can't do it like only trying to be nice or build relationships with people you think are going to be important to you. Because it's always the ones that you think, no, I don't think they're going to have any impact on my career trajectory. And they'll be the ones that wind up being clutch. So, try to be nice to people and network and get to know them. Because I do think resume is important, but even more so is, are you a good person? Nobody wants to hire the jerk. I don't care how good you are at what you do. If you're a jerk, companies don't want you. So it's important.
Yeah, I'll echo back off of what she said. We met probably 3 years ago, had coffee for about 20, 25 minutes or something. Well, it was longer than that one morning. And hadn't talked to each other since. And then I was like, well, who's a good speaker? This would be a good opportunity. And reach out, and she said yes. And so you never know when you're able to reconnect with those people. You get the card when you go to the events, you stick it in the drawer. And then you go, when you got these things and you start going through that, I forgot about, this person. Yeah. And then you ultimately make those connections.
It was so random. I was submitting paperwork to be able to teach the Citizenship in Society Merit Badge, which is really a lot of DEI stuff. And I'm like, hey, I'm an employment attorney. And Lucas was like, what? I don't, this is sort of like a little unicorn in the Central Texas area. There's not many around. And so he's like, let's do coffee. And so again, it had nothing to do with work. It was Boy Scouts.
Yeah, it was a social, civic thing.
Exactly.
So. All right.
You never know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. If anybody has any questions afterwards or wants to talk, feel free to stop by.
Thank all of you for attending today.